Hey, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. Hello, and welcome to our Thrive in Any Storm video series. We are just super grateful that you're here. We have a really cool conversation that we want to start cultivating and moving forward about leadership and leading through storms and how you can do that well to to change the narrative of what's really behind the leadership culture that we hear nowadays. And we have some amazing people to talk about that. In kind of the intro, we talk about, we say they're expert leaders. There's a difference between expert leaders and leadership experts. And what we have here is a group of expert leaders that are like really diving into leadership. We'll talk about what thrive in any storm really means as we go on through this. But first, I just want to introduce myself really quick, then we'll go around the horn with everybody else on here. My name is Travis Hearn. I am a 9-year Marine Corps veteran and with combat tours to Afghanistan and Iraq. And I fell in love with leadership throughout that time. I fell in love with leadership after that. My doctorate's in organizational change and leadership. So I geek out on this stuff all the time. So it's just when we started thinking about, hey, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this leadership change? It got my spidey senses tingling, and I love it. So I work with entrepreneurs, anybody that either leads, runs, or is a part of a hybrid team. That's kind of my expertise. I love teaching people how to be a healthier, more holistically healthy leader. So that's what I'm all about. And I am super happy to be here, and I'll toss it over to John for his introduction.
Hey, thanks, Travis. Hey, I'm John McCaskill. I am a retired Navy SEAL commander. I served in the Navy for 24 years, and 17 of that was in or connected to the SEAL teams. And along the way, I definitely had my share of storms, which we'll get into throughout the show today, if you will. And very excited to be here with this group of amazing leaders. And I love the differentiation between leadership experts and experts in leadership. I think we've got some leaders here who can share amazing stories, lessons that they learned throughout their time within the military and elsewhere. I mean, we're not just veterans. We are leaders in our communities, leaders in our families, and we can bring lessons from all of that to you guys. So we're excited to share that with you all today. And I'll turn it over to Teresa from here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Larson. I am a woman. I'm a leader. I'm a Marine Corps veteran too. I served for 4 years as an officer and got out. Did a year of professional softball. I was a pitcher, so my right arm is the golden arm compared to my left, still is. And then decided to become a doctor of physical therapy. And this person behind me is not real, and wasn't ever real, but is a good teaching tool for me, Skelly. But I've been a part of, so where I come in with leadership and leadership training is kind of the concept of lead you first. You got to take care of yourself and be healthy. And it's, so often we run into and this was coming from me, and you'll learn this about me today. It's taking care of yourself. How do you take care of yourself when you have a family and you're running a company? And it's all too often we come across people who are in leadership positions who are burnt out and strung out. And so we're here to help with that. Over to you, Philip.
Hey guys, how you doing? Philip Kuntz. I'm a former Navy SEAL. We had to balance out the teams. We got 2 Marines, so we needed 2 SEALs to help balance everything out. So I served on SEAL Team 10 just over 6 years, a couple deployments in AFRICOM, EUCOM, CENTCOM. I've got my master's in leadership and been a public speaker and a life and business coach now for the last 7 years. So excited to join this team. I feel a little intimidated, just to be honest, with the amount of expertise that's here. So I'm going to do my best to hold my own today and bring some of the life lessons that I've learned as well too, both in my personal life and in my professional life to the table. And our heart today is just to help. Our heart is to instill leadership principles. Our heart is to help you lead better as we become better versions of ourselves. So you guys, thanks for having me on and including me in this team as well too. I don't know if I mentioned I have my master's in leadership as well too, and live out here in Colorado with my wife and 5 kids, and just excited, guys. Excited right now to kick things off with this video series and the adventure and the journey that we are all embarking upon. So thanks.
Yeah, folks. Like I said, you got an A team here as far as leadership is concerned. We're gonna have a really good conversation. We do. I couldn't help but notice that the Marines were the only ones that just had their diplomas on the back of the wall. I don't know or if it's
And their sword.
and the SEALs all have their trident on their belts.
That's right.
I got my guns right here.
He's got his guns out.
I got it right here.
Yeah.
Teresa's actually named her guns. Teresa's actually named her arms. Please tell that story real quick, and then we'll get into the stuff that everyone's there to
This
listen
is a
to.
good icebreaker. So vicious and delicious. Vicious, delicious. It all did happen in a bar near Camp Pendleton, sticking up for a fellow Marine who's being hit on by some other person. And I just had to step in and say, you don't want to mess with vicious or delicious. Leave my friend alone. And there you have it.
That's where every great story starts, is in a bar, isn't it? Every great story. There I was in a bar.
The Marine Corps started in the bar.
It did. Ton Tavern.
Teresa's next podcast is going to be very superstitious with vicious and delicious. So with all that, as you can see, folks, this is going to be a fun conversation. So that's the tone of it. We're going to have a good conversation. We're going to talk. But I am going to kind of organize things, and I'm going to throw up the first question over to John. And so the first question is, what is the storm, and what does it look like to thrive in any storm?
Yeah, well, that's a great place to start, Travis. So I think much like many literal storms that are out there, right? We've got the thunderstorms, you got the snowstorms, you got hurricanes, tornadoes. There are many types of storms that people will experience in their lives, and they will handle them differently based on how well they're prepared for those storms and what they've learned from the past storms that they've gone through. Now, these quote unquote storms could be as benign as, I don't know, your kid missed the bus to school this morning and now you have to rearrange your day to maybe accommodate their schedule, to something much more drastic, losing your job, divorce, illness, or death of a loved one or a colleague. Now, I personally have experienced both sides of that spectrum, the benign storms, right? I've got kids and sometimes they're sick and I have to readjust my daily schedule around them. And, that is what it is. I adjust. And then I've experienced the other side of that spectrum, much more drastic sides of the storm, I guess the hurricane, if you will. I've had my daughter, my oldest daughter, when she was 6 months old, had major surgery. And there was a time there when we thought that we may actually lose her, and preparing for that thought and that emotion, that in and of itself was a storm that I had to prepare for. In the military, I had losses personally and professionally that I had to deal with and still lead as a leader in the SEAL teams. And so I had to adjust there. As far as these storms, no matter what, we can't run away from these, which is why we have the buffalo there. And I know Travis is going to talk about that later, but the buffalo doesn't run around the storm, doesn't run away from the storm. We can't run away from these storms. We must learn to not only survive in these storms, but thrive. Okay, so that comes to the second part of your question. What does thriving in any storm look like? You hear that phrase, that word, thrive, and you may imagine grassy meadows and that proverbial Rocky quote, the no sunshines and rainbows, or other side of that, the sunshine and rainbows. You're actually imagining that. It doesn't look like that. That's not what thriving looks like, at least not at first. Initially, I believe thriving looks like work. It looks like effort. It looks ugly. It looks like putting your head down and pushing through these challenges, the pain, the heartaches, the stressors, and then coming through on the other side a little scratched up, honestly, a little bruised, a little bent, but not broken. And when you put in the work, when you practice the discipline, you grow stronger, you grow smarter, ultimately you become better. And you get to a point where these storms, whatever they may be, barely faze you. Then, and only then, thriving, while it still looks like work, it looks like orchestrated work. It looks almost effortless, like poetry in motion. At that point, one has become so used to the work, they are doing the work, but their heads are above the clouds, right? They're not only thriving themselves, but they're looking around to see how everyone else is handling the storm and how they, as the leaders, can lift them up and help them to thrive too. Now, what is that work? That work could be something at your job, like putting in the hours to reach that deadline, manage a crisis, change the culture of the organization for the better. That work could be something in a relationship, maybe going to counseling as an individual and as a couple. And then being intentional maybe about date nights or having something that you're working towards together, some downtime together. That work could be something in preparing for a tragedy. That tragedy could be happening to you and you could be losing your job or something to that effect. You work to develop that robust network of support, maybe working to save money in your emergency account, working to have the most updated LinkedIn, right? Or updated resume, always at the ready. You put that work in, you're putting that work in. Bottom line, that work in the storm is always going to look different. But there's also work before and between the storms. Now, all that said, two things must be taken into account. One, preparing for the storm. We know they're coming. They are coming. You're in one of three areas in your life. Teresa's heard me say this before. You're either in the storm right now, you're in the process of coming out of a storm, or I hate to be the bearer of bad news, the third area that you can be in, you're heading for a storm. So with that in mind, you have to prepare for the storm mentally, physically, emotionally, professionally, personally. You have to develop your grit and your resilience. You have to prepare during the easy times, during those proverbial sunshine and rainbow periods, right? If you prepare yourself then, you'll be able to keep your head up. You'll be able to do the work and you'll be able to thrive. Now, that's the first thing that has to be taken into account, preparing. The second thing that must be taken into account is that helps you thrive is taking a knee between storms, taking a knee, taking a break, stepping back, stopping and pausing to lick your wounds, to heal from those storms. Because again, we're going to get beat up. We're going to get battered. Then looking back on what we learned and what we could do better. We do that all the time in the SEAL teams, in the Marine Corps. We do the after action report, right? With a debrief. And it doesn't only apply in the military on the battlefield, but doing that regular after action report, personally and professionally, after each storm, quote unquote, that we're going to go through, that's going to make you stronger for yourself, for your family, for your work team. And this is what the storms look like. And this is what thriving looks like in any storm. Love to hear you guys' thoughts.
Yeah, John, can I butt in here real quick, man?
Please.
A couple of things. One is I loved in the very beginning how you prepared by saying, a lot of times in life, as we say in the SEAL teams, we have to brace for impact. And that is not a fun stage of life. As you see the storm coming, bracing for impact is something that's a coined term that I've used in my life and still use now. It's not fun. You kind of get that pucker factor, right? You're like, oh, here it comes, brace for impact. And because you're going to get beat up, like you said. So I really appreciated that you really touched on that in the beginning. And then lastly is the AARs, the after action reports or after action reviews. What are the three questions that people can ask themselves? Because in the teams, maybe I'll just go ahead and answer my own question. we ask ourselves, I talk about this in my leadership presentation. It's so important that we hit the pause button and we take a 50,000 foot view, both personally and professionally, and say, hey, I gotta kind of decompress and I have to kind of work through what just happened, my lessons learned. So the three questions that we ask ourselves after every single live fire evolution or after every single mission, we all circle up together as SEALs before we take care of our gear, get some chow or go to sleep, whatever it is, we all circle together and we ask ourselves three basic questions. What went right? what went wrong, and how can we improve?
Right.
And I think that is really instilled within the Marine Corps. I know you guys do that in the SEAL teams. It's really helped us remain at the tip of the spear, really helped really embed a humble learning posture as we admit, hey guys, we're not perfect, so what did we do right? Because we're going to do that again. What did we do wrong? And identifying the mistakes and where we screwed up. And then the third one was, how can we improve?
Yeah, and in that we talk about how do you take care of your gear afterwards, right? You do the after action, but you also have to clean up all your gear. And what order do you do that? You've got to take care of your team gear first,
Yep.
then your personal gear, and then yourself. But that third part, that self, that's important.
Huge.
You've got to do that. You've got to take care of yourself, and that is going to help in preparing you to go through those storms and during those storms. So.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, and I don't want to capitalize here, but as leaders, we look at ourselves last. When we're going through the storm, especially after the storm, we're looking around at all the carnage that's happened because of the storm, and we make sure everyone else's buckets are filled, right? We make sure everyone else is squared away. Everyone else has what they need, and then we take care of ourselves last. And that's admirable. Yeah, that's noble. However, we can't completely negate our own needs.
Exactly.
Because then we just be running on fumes all the time. And honestly, when I'm running on fumes with my wife and 5 kids, like no one's getting my best. No,
You're always on fumes
throughout the day, right? So I got to take time every day to be able to make sure that I fill that figurative bucket, full of water. So I got a lot to give out.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll also chime in to say that these are things that I wish I knew as a collegiate athlete and as a young officer, like learning to take care of yourself first, and like ways to thrive in the storms that are going to come in war, in running a platoon, in running a business. Those weren't skills that I learned. And maybe they were brought up, but I didn't pay attention. Right. And I tried to avoid storms, right? I was fearful of storms. I knew going into war was not easy, but it was like, all right, we're there. This is my job. I know some bad things can happen, and I am going to do my best to protect my people and accomplish the mission. And I put myself always last. And I was very good at taking care of everyone else, even on my collegiate softball team and in the Marine Corps. And that even carried over into when I started my company, Movement RX, I was so good at taking care of everyone else but me. And as a mother, I feel the same sometimes, that pull of like my kids demand so much. Yeah. But I have to take care of myself. And now, thanks to the work I get to do in the people, and I know I'll get into more of this, but like, and the things that I've chosen to lean into because of the avoidance of storms or fear of them, or sickness that I developed because I didn't want to face my own storms, or really dive into the why. I'm able to now more easily work through them. And, but I do wish that I had some of these skills earlier on in life. And it's always good. Hindsight's always 20/20. But the fact that we're talking about this for all the young people out there who are either in college or going into the service or starting companies, or whether you're, been running a company for a long time, like you are the principal. Like if you don't work, things aren't going to work in your life or your family and your company. But I will say that the choosing to accept the fact that storms are going to happen and to be okay with it, to be okay with the fact that, okay, I'm going through a storm, anchor down, right? Or it's going to come. It's okay. It's part of life. Or it happened. That's okay. It's when I personally, and this is, in reading up on it, this is the truth for a lot of people. If they don't choose to accept the fact that these are going to happen, that hard times are going to happen, good times are going to happen too. Struggle will happen. Loss will happen, right? We all will pass someday. Instead of fighting it, accept it and be the best you can in the now. And what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that. That's the storm concept. Like you could be having an amazing life and still going through a storm. Like they could happen simultaneously. That's the thing. Like it's
great point.
I used to think, oh my God, let me get through this so I can just start to feel awesome again. And then the next one popped up. And it's like this yo-yo feeling and yo-yo way of being versus like, all right, this is happening, but this is also amazing and happening. And I can have a hard life and an amazing life at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be happy and still struggle at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And struggle is just part of life.
Yeah.
Teresa,
That's awesome. I want to kind of just chime in. Okay. I want to give everybody a kind of the concept John mentioned a little bit earlier, but kind of what we're talking about in Buffaloes and the storm and the concept kind of that we're working on is like okay, there's going to be storms. And when we think of herd animals, we think of cows, we think of buffalo. When a storm comes, most herd animals will either run away from the storm, they'll run directly away from the storm, or they'll hide. They'll go around. They'll try to go around the storm. What the buffalo does is it charges straight through. It picks up his herd and it charges straight through that storm. It's the quickest way to get through the storm. So what we are here to do is really to change the narrative of how we walk through that storm and what we do and how we operate. And it's when we were talking about the being the humble leader. I know it's hard to say, like two Marines and 2 SEALs talking about humble leadership, but I promise you, we will drive that point home. And that's the concept. And I just wanted to lead with that.
And Teresa, one of the things that you just mentioned was being honest with yourself. And I just want to highlight some of the people who are actually commenting right now. And we've got amazing comments that are coming through. Specifically, the one from Robert, he said, we have to be absolutely honest with ourselves. And that's one of the things that so great comment, Robert. Thank you for that. And in my own life, I had a come to Jesus moment, basically. When I got out of the teams, it was probably 3 or 4 years afterwards. And all this stuff started popping up, in my life. I started getting angry all the time. And I started telling everybody, like, I'm fine. And my come to Jesus moment was when I really was honest with myself. And I had to come to terms with, it's okay to not be okay. You've heard before, there's no Rambos in the SEAL teams. There's no Rambos in the military, right? And so we have to rely on each other. But first and foremost, that first crucial step is simply just admitting to yourself, I'm not okay right now. And I need some help. I need to pick up the phone and call a significant other, call one of my best friends, someone you can be transparent with and vulnerable with. There's another word that we're not super comfortable with, right, Travis? Not only humility, but vulnerability. It's like, yikes, what is that? I don't want to be vulnerable, right? Does that make me weak if I'm vulnerable? So yeah, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to admit that. Like, no one can hold it all together all the time. It's impossible. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to open up the second question, and I'll throw it over to Teresa. And you touched on quite a bit of this already, T. And I call her T, Dr. T. So bear with me when I call her T. So T-Pain. Teresa, what advice would you give to someone who is already deep in a storm? They don't have that time to prepare, like I mentioned. They're already deep in that storm and they're looking to escape. What would you put out there?
Well, that's a great question. And I definitely have been deep in storms and wanting to escape on a number of occasions. But I know now, in my great wisdom and just life experience and diving deep into this, that there's no escape. It's just, you got to lean into it. And it's not easy though, when you're in it, like as Brene Brown talks, like you're in the arena and there's, you're feeling kind of bloody and sweaty and everyone's criticizing you, or you just lost someone, or you just felt really put down or really hurt or whatever it is, right? Whatever is going on, the only way to, there's no escape. It's just through. Like trauma means wound, right? The only way through trauma is leaning into it and healing from it and choosing to do whatever it takes to heal from it. And I've learned some things. So as a doctor of physical therapy, I'm into physical longevity, right? Like doing all the things to prepare our body for the long haul, not just in the short haul. Yes, I love, performing now, but what can I do for the long haul? But I've found that, I've also chosen to study more of the emotional intelligence that happens too from working on your physical longevity, and what can we do for our minds that can affect our body and vice versa. And come to find out with, starting my business, I needed to lean on a mindfulness. I needed to lean on an expert in the emotional health field. So I chose a brain researcher who is a mindfulness and meditation expert, amazing man. And, I learned some very awesome physical practices to help me work through these storms and to understand that they're going to come and they're okay and they're part of life, and not to be scared of them, but to be prepared for them, as John had mentioned. And so here's some things I want you all to think about when you really want to escape. Here's what you want to do. The concept of anchoring down, right? I was in the Marine Corps, so the Navy was my ride, but anchoring down is a great concept. To throw that in there.
Air Force was my ride, so
Anchoring down, right? That was a concept of like, all right, when you're in it, you don't want to make decisions necessarily when you're high on a mountaintop or low in a valley emotionally. It's like what you got to do is it's almost like the concept of sitting on your hands. Like, what do you need to do to double down on self-care? What does that look like? Not coping poorly, like numbing in front of a TV or drinking yourself or drugs or food, right? But like, what are some things that help you feel better? Getting outside for a walk, exercise, eating healthy food, meditating. I love personally as a physical person, and there's a lot of research around this, is a double down on self-care is doing some soft tissue mobility or something to like soothe the aches and pains of my body, which also help me calm the mind. It's like free biofeedback that you're giving yourself. So the body, if you work through the body, it actually can help calm the mind, calm the body, calm the mind. Because to be honest, when you have when you have a storm, pay attention to your physiology. You tighten, your heart rate increases, you start to sweat, you get all nervous. I used to like literally ball up, like my posture, I'm 6'1", I became 5'8" when I was going through a storm. I like literally would tighten up, and that happens. And so opening yourself up, standing tall, working on your body, doing like things that make you feel good, also help calm the tissue down, lower your heart rate, decrease the tension, which helps decrease the spiraling that can happen in the mind. That is exactly what meditation can do too, which is also a physical practice because it taps into the breath. Controlling your breath is a remote control between the brain and body. So doubling down on those things, like me just knowing the science, being a scientist, knowing the science behind it has actually really helped me want to double down on it, because I'm like, oh crap, okay, this is happening, but I got it. I got these tools and I can work through it a little more efficiently because I know exactly what I need to do. Some soft tissue mobility, some meditation, mindfulness, being in the present moment, right? The research shows if you're in the present moment, you're going to be happier anyway. So put down the phone, stop going on social media and scrolling and looking at everyone else's life. Look at your own life. So that's a form of self-care, right? So anchoring down on those self-care things. Maybe it's going to the hot springs and doing some sauna, diving into some heat, right? Maybe it's cold. Anything so that's the first thing. The second one is the people you're around. Pay attention to the people you're around. Like these guys right here are amazing gentlemen that I get to work with. And I feel so happy. That already brings me joy. My team at Movement X brings me joy. We just had a holiday party this morning. Did some funny, weird stuff. And it was great. And, but like when I was going through storms before, I'll tell you this, I've been around some pretty crappy people. Like, not to say Kurt is crappy, I should say. I'm being filtering my language here, but like some of the people I've chosen to be around haven't been that great for me. And like really paying attention to who brings me joy, who's positive in my life, who is, who can I lean on to help me through the storm? Who's that empathetic ear that can help me? And believe me, if you take a look, probably there's some people you could probably lovingly let go of. So that's the second thing. And then the third one is just knowing this concept that if you take action in your life, meaning, okay, I don't feel like going outside and seeing people, but if you literally go outside to do it, or, choose to lean into this this forgiveness or this self-mobilization that you're going to do, or the meditation that you're uncomfortable with because you have to be alone with your monkey mind. Like if you lean into that action, motivation will happen over time, but it'll take time. But like you can't wait for motivation to do anything, or you're going to wait your whole life. And so that will help also turn the tide on, all right, I'm going through a storm. I don't feel like doing much, but I know if I do these things, this is the result. And you just do it. And so those are 3 things. So anchor down, double down on self-care, find the right people, right? And then remember that action must precede the motivation that you're looking for.
Yeah, Teresa, while you were talking, I think we all just like stood and like we just talked about posture and like say we all, I think everybody in the room probably just like stood up like, oh man, that looks pretty bad. One of the things that really resonated with what you were saying to me is just like all these things take time. Taking care of ourselves takes time. Everything you talked about takes time. And when we're in that storm, we don't have time. We think we don't have time. It's that mindset of, no, I got to get through this. I got to knuckle down and I got to get this done. I got to go. And when we talk about the storm concept and making it out on the other side in a more healthy, holistically better way, taking the time to pause and do all the things that you said are what's going to get us there in a healthy way. It's not us just burning. There was a comment earlier about burnout, and just when we talk about the burnout, that we don't want to run through the storm and get through it and get on the other side and like the other one comes and it blasts us back. We want to be able to do what you were saying and really dig into becoming that slow charging buffalo that it takes its time, is healthy, does those and practices those healthy things that you just said. I love, you made me fix my posture and I love what you said. So I had to chime.
Yeah. There's actually, so just even like some of the research around posture, standing in the Wonder Woman posture or Wonder Man, Superman posture, like actually can improve your mood and feeling of confidence.
Testosterone.
I look like a monkey.
It increases your testosterone.
Right. Which is, I need that too. But
what was I going to say? Captain Morgan's pose, like, right? Like,
yes. Yes. So, something that's interesting to me, what I would love to throw it over to you guys is that like, so in the Marine Corps or playing, being in college, or like I choose who I'm around now with my business. So that's awesome. Like my husband often tells me like, I don't think you should work for anyone. You should just work for yourself. It's a good idea. And I like running my own business. But when I was in the Marines, right, there were leaders I didn't choose. I had to work for them. And some of them were great. Some of them weren't. And so like in the military has a different operation tempo. Like with my own business, I can say, hey boss, I'm taking the day. But in the service, that's different. Or if you're working for someone, that might be different. So how would you guys suggest, right, if you doubling down on these self-care things, finding the right people, how do you do that in a regular maybe a more traditional organization or the military?
Yeah, for me, because I also have, I work in that. I'm a leader in another professional organization. So it's not professional. And that's a weird way to say it, in a business that is not my own. But what I think it is all about boundaries. For me, it's setting up clear boundaries and understanding and letting it be known, like being very open and clear. Like, hey, I need like mental health is very, very important to me. So I do take mental health days. Like that's going to happen. And I think being very up in front with whoever the supervisor, your bosses, whatever that looks like, even and especially when you're leading a team, to be able to model what that looks like. I mean, we saw in the military, nobody, if I didn't take leave, none of my Marines were going to take leave. If I took leave, they felt like it was okay for them to take leave. So if you are taking care of yourself, and when you have supervisors and peers and subordinates, when you have teammates, when you are allowing yourself to set up really clear boundaries and to start and to have really, really healthy practices, it gives others permission to do so. And it shows your team that like, hey, like this is very important to me. So this is what I'm going to prioritize. So that's kind of how I do it.
Love that word boundaries, Travis. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Go for it, John. John always has something to say. Go ahead, bud.
Well, the mental health piece that you mentioned there at the end, Travis, And I know I saw Dr. T post about this recently, something that I did as a junior 05 when I was starting to actually take the first steps on my mental health recovery, mental health support journey. I had this big calendar behind me, and I would mark my days that I was going to go see the psychologist or the mental health folks. I would mark it mental health appointment in big red letters, and I would circle it. And I would have guys come up to me that are like, hey boss, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah, why? They're like, well, because I see you got a mental health appointment. I'm like, yeah, because I'm maintaining my mental health. Just like, if anyone goes to the gym, they're applauded and supported. Hey, they're maintaining their physical fitness, their mental health, or their physical fitness and their physical health. If anyone goes to a psychologist, everyone's like, oh, something's wrong with John. No, not necessarily. I mean, at that point, yes, I was having my own personal struggles, but I was also looking to maintain at times, and I wanted to normalize that. And I think it's very important that we as leaders normalize that. Yes. Coming back to setting boundaries as leaders, a lot of the time we forget that our people have boundaries, and we'll send emails and text messages in the middle of the night, or at least late in the evening or during the weekend. And what I've started doing, granted, I run my own business now, I don't have too many subordinates, but what I've started doing in general is at the bottom of my email, it says, look, I work weird hours. Please don't think that I expect an immediate response to this email. And I've also started scheduling my emails. I know with some of the technology that's out there, the new apps, you can schedule your emails to be sent. So like you may have a thought at 3 a.m. and you can type it down into your email, but you don't need to send it at 3 a.m. because guess what? If your workers are getting it after hours, whether that's in the evening or over the weekend, if they're getting it from you as the boss, they think that you expect a response. Mm-hmm. So you have to be aware of your people's boundaries, but also manage the expectations on both sides.
I know as a young officer, I did not know how to have boundaries. I said yes to everything. I felt like I had to be perfect. There was a lot of expectations I put on myself, but that I also felt I had from my superiors. And then even I think in starting my own business or in the early years, I didn't know how to have boundaries either. I think that's a really important skill. And that if you don't, it can create some needless storms, right? And so that's definitely what it did for me. So I'm thankful for that I have that ability now. But, I, as a young Marine too, like sharing about any vulnerability, I thought that was a weakness, which definitely not, come to find out. So there's a lot, most of the stuff we're talking about, I've definitely struggled with, but thankfully, have been able to weather many storms since the hardcore struggling years, and still struggle, but I welcome it now, thankfully, more than before. And I guess this actually, I have a question for you, Philip. I'm going to punt it over to you. Is well, we know adversity is going to come. So how do you best overcome adversity when you're in the storms?
Yeah. Great question. And just as a side note, Teresa, I'm still learning how to say no more often as well, too. It doesn't feel good to tell someone no. It just doesn't. You want to be the superhero. You want to say yes all the time, and feel like you can do it. So instead of saying no, though, I can't quite get there yet. I just say not now, right? I'm like, hey, I'd love to help, love to help you out, but I just can't right now. So, love the boundaries. I was planning on talking, maybe I will, about a couple of things as far as overcoming adversity, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I think there's a good direction that this conversation is going, as far as boundaries go, but that's also the other side of that coin is, if you don't have great boundaries, what do you do? And you alluded to this a little bit as well too. What do you do when you realize you have this moment of clarity, and you're like, oh my gosh, my worst enemy right now is my head or my thoughts. My worst enemy is myself.
100%.
So not only have I been sucking at boundaries, but I've allowed the negativity and the pessimism of those people around me that I can't really help being around. I've allowed that to really impact me on a deep level. And unfortunately, that's the unfortunate thing about negativity, is that it's contagious. The good news, though, is that being positive is also very contagious as well too. So for me, something that I've had to learn, because as we all know, we can't choose who we work with in the SEAL teams. That would be nice, though, wouldn't it, John? You can't choose, right, who's on your team in any branch of the military. And I really first learned this growing up swimming. I swam competitively through college for 12 years. And, you can't, there I was thrown in this environment, and I noticed that I was starting to get in my own head and psyching myself out. And throughout the years, I have kind of 5 S's, 5 words that begin with an S, that have really kind of helped me identify those negative, intrusive, and oftentimes debilitating thoughts. So the first one is stop, is to spot that negative thought. So that just comes with good EQ, or emotional intelligence. I would encourage everybody, take personality tests, learn how you're wired, how you're hardwired in life. And as you're growing in your EQ, you're going to know more and more and catch the thoughts, some of those negative, intrusive thoughts. So spotting the thought. And then the second one is stop. And I actually literally picture a stop sign. So if my mind is starting to wander, if I'm starting to go down a negative path, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm having confrontation with somebody, I find myself having fake conversations in my head with those people. Am I the only one that does that?
Nope.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah. So I find myself having, and I'm like, what am I doing right now? I'm just spinning my wheels. I'm expending emotional and mental energy that I don't necessarily have at this moment. So I spot the thought, and then I stop it. Picture that stop sign. And then I stand against it. And what I mean by stand is I actually have it on a little Post-it note. So whatever that thought is, maybe that thought is, I'm never going to measure up, or I'm always screwing up, or whatever that thought might be, that intrusive thought, which honestly, sometimes it is birthed in our lives from childhood. Maybe some of these negative, intrusive thoughts you heard from your parents growing up, and you've just internalized that and bought into it to the point where it's become second nature. It's almost become a part of who you are. So if that thought is, I'm never going to measure up, then what you do, and we call this cognitive therapy, is you come up with a phrase that directly combats that negative thought. So maybe you might say, I'm a beloved husband and father, and I do my best to live every day, something like that, something short, something that directly combats that negative, intrusive thought. And then I write it down on a sticky note. I write it down 3 different times on 3 different sticky notes, and I put them like on my computer, in my car, on my mirror of my bathroom, where I'm seeing it. And then throughout the day, I'm actually saying that out loud. I'm repeating that out loud. And over time, we form new neurological pathways. And if you'll find out that over time, you'll stop thinking those more negative, intrusive thoughts and start speaking the truth, which is what I say, speaking the truth over yourself. So standing against it is the third S. The fourth one then is substitute. And I kind of mentioned that. So you stand against it with a positive, with a truth statement, and then you substitute it, meaning basically you distract yourself. I'm a spiritual person, so I might decide to pray, to substitute that thought and just ask for some help and some grace in that moment. And then the last one is you seek help. And our team before here, this is exactly what we're doing. We can seek help from friends that are a part of our pack, that are a part of our team, that want to lift us up and keep us and hold us accountable and speak truth to us as well too, and really encourage us. So those are the 5 S's that I think are really important. Not only boundaries, but when we find ourselves stuck in our own head, I think it's really important to be able to practice those 5 S's, to be able to try to get unstuck, if you will, get out of your head and start living in the moment and being a little bit more present as well too. And I'll just pause there. Do you guys have any thoughts?
I would love to jump on that real quick. So Teresa and I were actually this morning meeting. So her company, Movement RX, I'm a subcontractor under that, and we met to do kind of our your yearly kickoff meeting, talking about our things that we were proud of from last year, accomplishments, those types of things that we want to do this coming year. And one of the things that we talked about during that same meeting was the positive affirmations. And you just hit on that, how important those positive affirmations are. But it's great to stand in front of your mirror and say, "Hey, John, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you," right? The old Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. That's great. But all joking aside, that is incredibly powerful. But you hit on something really important there, Philip, is that when we go throughout our day and we have those negative comments that we say to ourselves, whether it's, hey, we stub our toe, or we slam the door wrong, or we drop a glass of milk, and we start saying, "Oh, John, you're a dummy." And as soon as you say that, you got to catch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it? Spot and stop and take stand,
Yep.
right? Yeah. Hey, you've got to take those positive affirmations that you were saying to yourself in the mirror one step further. You got to take them with you all day long and say them when you catch yourself saying those negative things. And real quick, though this isn't necessarily tied to this question, I just want to hit on the fact that my previous question to Teresa, I said something about escaping the storm. I probably shouldn't have used the term escape, because I think escape sounds as though maybe you're going and you're drinking alcohol to where you numb yourself to the point where you aren't experiencing the storm, right? Probably a better word would have been to come through the storm. You're in the storm. What do you recommend to come through the storm? So I'm really glad you actually used a different term than escape. You said to come through. So I appreciate that, and I just want to make sure I noted that. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, John and Philip, for answering that. I like the structure of the 5 S's. I think sometimes when you're going through it, actually sometimes your fine motor skills go out the door, and having physically, right? So just having some kind of structure to how you sequence through working through it can be super helpful, especially in those moments. I will add that, this is for anyone. I'm a big fan of some great researchers out there in vulnerability and shame. Like, one of them is Brene Brown. I think it's a human experience to experience shame. But here's the thing, like if we are going through something or have a memory or whatever is going on, and we look outside of ourselves to the world for worthiness or you're enough, you're not necessarily going to find it. Maybe in the people that are empathetic and loving to you, but you need to look within yourself. And that is a lesson I've learned over and over again, is when I look outside in the world for worthiness before I look within, I don't really find it. Yeah. I can find likes, right? I can find people who are like, "Good job, Teresa, you're amazing. Oh my gosh, look at these credentials you have, and you look like you do everything perfectly. And oh my gosh, you wrote a book," and blah, blah, blah. But that's got to come. All of those accomplishments mean nothing, right? It's got your worthiness. You have to be okay with who you are. And that's like building a muscle. You sit in front of the mirror, stand in front of the mirror, you remind yourself you are an amazing human being, a very special human being, and you are worthy and you are enough. But that, without getting too touchy-feely, that's got to come from within. And that me being a leader and standing here with all of you all, I belong here. This is where I belong, and I am worthy, and I don't need anyone else to tell me that. Mm-hmm. And that is a good place for me to be, and I'm proud of that. But that definitely wasn't me 10 years ago. I needed you all to tell me I was okay and worthy, but I don't need that anymore. And every once in a while, this is a little tip and trick too that's popped up, is sometimes that voice of "I'm not good enough" or "you're not doing enough" will pop up, will come in, and I'm like, "All right, you're there. Okay, goodbye." I'm like the whole stop, spot, spot, stop, stop, spot. That, it's like spot it and okay, you're there, quiet it, focus on something else, right? Focus on the good things or whatever your child, like the real things that are right in front of you. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I added that, because that is a very real feeling that, whether we like to admit it or not, comes up with every one of us.
Teresa, I like you a little bit better now because you like Brene Brown. I'm a big Brene Brown fan as well too. I actually talk about her quite a bit in some
Yeah.
of my leadership presentation.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, she says so poignantly. She says, you know, if you basically run away from your failures and your setbacks and your hurt, over time they're going to own you. They
Yeah.
own us. But if we
Yeah.
have the courage to look at our own stories of setbacks and hurt and failure, we get to write our own ending. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. It's
Yeah.
so powerful. And that's what we're saying. That's what we're all saying, right?
Mhm.
In this conversation right now. So yeah, when we're able to own it as leaders, when we make mistakes, I mean, geez, let's admit, like the four most powerful words a leader can say is, I messed that up. Right, when we're open, when we're honest with our team and able to take the blame and then work on it, right? Not point the finger at other people.
Yeah.
That's a home run, you know. But those leaders who blame everybody else, you know, it's really to their detriment. So we've got about 8 minutes left. So I'm gonna toss a softball to Travis. I got a question for you, man. As far as our team, as far as our pack goes, and really leaning on each other, how can we best move through those storms together?
Yeah, dude, that's a great question. So as leaders, psychologically, whenever we're going through any kind of crisis or stress, we go back brain. I call it back brain. We go into a part of our brain where we just operate as we it's kind of like that combat. It's you go into your bare necessity of what you do as a human. So when we get into leadership storms and we start trying to lead in high stress environments, and storms are high stress, they are unpredictable. We just lead from just what we know. We default to our old settings. So just a little bit of a story about how I had done that. We were in Afghanistan, 2010, and I just come back in off of a patrol, and we got back in. I got to the COC. We started doing the debrief. We were the first stick to come back, the first vehicle convoy to come back on base. And so we got back in, gun, horse, cowboy. That's what we called it. We took care of our guns, we took care of our horse, then we took care of our cowboy, and then I walked into the COC. It's gun, horse, cowboy. That was the rule. And then so we walked in, start debriefing, and all of a sudden this giant percussion explosion right outside of the EPC, the checkpoint, our entry control point. And we knew what it was. An IED went off on the convoy that was right behind us that I had just driven over that road. Our convoy had just driven over that road, and we somehow missed the IED, but it went off and killed one of our Marines. So I jump into this storm hits me, and my eyes go wide, and I'm like, okay, my default is I had my Marines in the COC. I was like, okay, you do this, that. I just started directing. I started being hierarchical. I started being uncaring of how people felt. I didn't even pay attention to what the Marine's name was. And to caveat, this is a true failure of leadership on my part. 4 days into this, I'm leading that way, and I finally take a step back and I look, and my Marines are smoked. You can see it on their face. I finally take a breath and understand that, like, I trained the Marine that died, and he was really good friends with my Marines. And I didn't take any of that into consideration when I'm trying to drive and try to pull these people through a storm with my head down, trying to get my Marines to do what I wanted them to do, and I needed them to do, because we had to have vengeance. That's what we had to have. And so when we talk about bringing up your herd in these storms, it's about taking a step back when this thing hits. And Teresa, you talked about this, and collecting yourself, taking a breath, looking around at the people around you and seeing what's there. I may be operating out of the back part of my brain, and I can only lead in one way, but Teresa can lead in a different way. John can lead in a different way. Philip can lead in a different way. How can we together walk through this storm in a healthier, more efficient, and better way? So when you are faced with these storms that just seem like waves crashing over you, and you can't breathe, it's my advice to anybody who's going through those storms and has a team around. Everybody should have a team around them, whether it's your team of subordinates, whether it's your peers, whether you have a group like we do, the four of us, that can hold each other accountable and also speak life into each other, real, true life. To be able to have those people around you and be your herd as you move through these storms, you're going to figure out that when you come on the other side of whatever that storm is, that your team is better, you are a better leader, and you've built this sense of trust that can really only be carved in a storm, in a team, in a fire team. It can really only be cultivated in those atmospheres. So if you as a leader can take a breath and step back and look at your teammates, look at your people, look who's around you, and really start to just bring the best out in them to be able to accomplish a mission, to be able to grow your business, to be able to get through some kind of storm, that's how you're going to get through it and be better as you come out on the other side. So yeah.
Love it, dude. Wise thoughts from the Hearn.
The Hearn. The Marine can be taught at some point. Yeah, that was a really big leadership failure. That was one of the biggest. That was probably the culminating point in my leadership career that I was like, man, I'm doing this wrong. I need to figure something else out. I cannot do this. We talked about burnout earlier, and that's where it was at.
Well, we also talked about the after action report, and it sounds like you did your own personal after action report. What were you doing right? What were you doing wrong? What could you do better? And you changed because of that. And you are a better leader because of it. Yes, it was a leadership mistake, but you learn from it and you move forward.
Yeah. Yep.
That's it, man. That's what leaders do.
Yeah. Instead of, Travis, internalizing that, right? Internalizing it. And then that's when the shame and the regret comes in and starts to attack our identities at the core of who we are. And that's a bad place to be when we internalize those failures rather than acknowledging them. Like Teresa said, acknowledging it, right? And be like, okay, I'm going to work through this now. I've got some lessons learned here, so I don't make the same mistake again. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you. We got about go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, well, I was going to say that's the real failure is if you choose to just turn your head to that learning, and you're not, and you didn't. But that is something that, I wouldn't be standing here talking like this or even running the business the way I do without all of the failures and learning from them. Even the hires and fires and different things I've learned in running a business. And even as a young Marine officer, sometimes I get that feeling of, I wish I could go back with what I know now, but what, I'm glad I'm where I am at now. I'm glad I am where I am now. And I'm glad I chose to lean into the growth versus be like, let it eat away at me.
Yeah. So we got 2 minutes, 1 minute. I want to wrap us up here. I just want first, thank you everybody who jumped in. Thank you guys for being so active in the chat. We're this is going to be a recurring theme. This is the first of many. And what it is all leading up to, we're gonna have a culminating event here in Colorado Springs in June, on June 1st at the beautiful Glen Erie Castle. We're gonna feed you. It's gonna be amazing. So the link is in the chat. I think John posted it in the chat. One thing that I did want to put, Tim Miller, he's in the chat. He posted this link to the site, but it's a DARPA study that came out in 2021 that found that 84% of the respondents to the survey said that their workplace conditions had contributed to at least one mental health challenge. That is scary.
Wow.
84%.
Yeah.
And so for those of you that are out there listening, that listen to this is why we are here. We want to help change the tide of how people see leaders. We want to change the culture of leadership to be one of consideration of mental, physical wellness and health. And we believe that fully healthy leaders are great leaders. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this conference and throughout these next few months. So stay tuned for what we have coming. Check us all out on LinkedIn. We post some really great LinkedIn, Facebook, all the social medias that you can find. We're all on there and we post some great content there. So just go on, if follow along with us. I promise you won't be inundated. And if you are, then you can unfollow us. It's easy, but
you'll be edutained.
Thank you all. Yeah, you will be entertained. Thank you guys all so much. And just stay tuned because there's going to be some really amazing content that comes out of this group. I got chills right now just feeling about what's going to happen. So thank you all. And I appreciate you. We'll see you next time.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
You guys.